Welcome to Boardable's webinar with Sherry Taylor, where today we're going to be talking about how you can secure larger donations from individuals that sit on your board. We know everyone, especially coming out of 2020, has a probably very a lot of stretch goals around fundraising. And what I like about what Sherry's here to present is not just about the individual board members, getting them to ask for money, teaching them more of the skills that they may need to go out and fundraise, but actually taking a step back and looking at operationally how your nonprofit fundraising efforts through your board are even set up and how the organization is set up, so that we can look at a larger view of the financial approach to fundraising. So with that, I don't need to say any more. Sherry, take it away.
Awesome. Okay, so welcome everybody. If you are an executive director that has joined us today who hopes to get some tips on, I would say, managing up your board and helping them be more strategic fundraisers, I'm so glad you're here. And if you're a board member who's really just interested in how can I make my time more efficient? How can I make a greater impact on the fundraising for my organization? Today will be very useful for you as well. Now, we're talking about raising more funds from individuals, but I've rooted this in this concept of, and how do we do that when we've kind of raised the same amount of money every year? So let's talk about that. So as Julie said, my name is Sherry. I'm in Chicagoland, also with flurries these last couple of days, which we're not happy about in April. Over a decade ago, I migrated from my corporate career into the nonprofit sector and had a bit of early success in scaling the organization I worked for. But I'll tell you, a lot didn't add up for me. Maybe you found that too. And I found that a lot of the advice on traditional fundraising models and frankly a lot of the industry's misconceptions were actually keeping us from growing, and we're keeping other great missions that I had come in contact with from growing. And so I, from day one, really tried to look at things differently, and I started my own business to help nonprofit CEOs who are killing it in so many areas, but still needed more money. And they really wanted to understand what that path was that I broke through or kind of put to the side, so that that revenue could grow at a higher rate and be really on the trajectory that we wanted it to be on. And so since then, I've had the privilege of helping hundreds of nonprofit CEOs all over the country, equipping boards to really learn what you need to do to shift into a true financing model and a true financing plan for your organization, so that you have all the money you need, but especially the money that you need that's unrestricted, so that you can invest not only in programs, but also in overhead. And that is really one of the keys to keeping you from plateauing. So we're gonna jump right in the deep end here. I got lots to cover. I'm gonna talk fast. Questions in the chat. Julie's gonna help and watch that chat box. But know that I'm gonna try to leave a little bit of time at the end to get to your questions too. Lastly, if anybody's question didn't get answered, I'm sure Julie will pass them to me, and I am more than happy to respond specifically, even if it's a private question. So I want to talk about the three things that I see that actually cause your funding to plateau. We're going to talk about how to avoid them. Then I want you to get this concept of shifting into that true financing model that actually helps your organization get and stay on a growth trajectory. And then I want to talk specifically to the board and anybody touching fundraising on how you can align every hour you're spending with the activities that yield the most money. My whole methodology is focused on your limited time and making sure that aligns with the dollars that you need to grow your organization. Now, here's what happened. I was hired to do a board training this last year for a national organization that's fighting a disease we're all familiar with. And I was in a lot of the plannings with the amazing executive committee. And the longtime board president said to me, you know, we're really good at raising $4 million every year. And we all gave him kind of high fives for consistency, right? But you know, I said, I'm going to ask you a little bit of a funny question. Do you need more money? Right? And we kind of laughed, and I knew the answer to it, right? But um, they hired me to do a fundraising training, which was great. It was fun. But I got to tell you, oftentimes it's all the things we're doing on an annual basis that actually sets us up to raise more money. That is the thing that is broken or the thing that we need to fix. And so I had so many people coming to me before 2020 with this like, hey, we're just not at the growth rate that we want to be at. And then 2020 hit, and I don't need to tell you what happened there, you know. And so maybe some of us had a spike in funding because we were frontline, and that's great. And we're wondering, how do we keep that going? Or maybe we held steady, and we're just we want to use 2021 to be like, that was the old us, this is the new us. I'm so glad you're here to learn about the methodology that I teach today, and how you can use that to really get off that plateau. Now, here's where most organizations get stuck. This is a real challenge in our sector. And for me, this is actually a huge reason people come to me. They're stuck, and something has to change before they can level up again. And so of the 1.5, 1.6 million nonprofits in the US, 77% of nonprofits have never reached $1 million, and 91% have never reached 5 million. That's a crazy stat to me. It like drives my business every day, because I know how much we depended on the people in this pie chart, you, my goodness, the last 18 months, if I can say, you know, for decades, but especially the last 18 months. So I study where organizations get stuck and help people get over the hurdle. So let's go through those 3 areas that I find are keeping organizations funding from growing and thus plateauing. Now, the first one, can we just jump in the deep end here? I'm going to bring up overhead. Overhead is my favorite word. If you follow me on LinkedIn, you will see I talk about overhead a lot. So join me over there if you'd like to hear about my soapbox on overhead. So oftentimes organizations are coming to me and they're really in that, you know, 91, 90, 89, 88% of program spending. That is what a lot of people in the industry will tell us, hey, great, high five, you got to keep it over 90% or you're not going to get funding. Well, here's the problem. If 2020 can do anything for us, right, it really proved that a lot of these misconceptions in our sector should end. They didn't do any of us any favors. And so the biggest root issue of all of this is this concept that we should be able to do more on less, which is bonkers in my opinion, right? So that do more on less of change lives, solve world problems, continue serving in times of crisis, change your model in times of crisis, like serve double the people in times of crisis. Again, you get the picture. That doesn't work, and it's exhausting us, right? So if we look at the flip side of that and we ask, like, what did you need, right, to actually do more these last 12, 15 months? What did you need? And the answer to that is you needed unrestricted, accessible cash. But we're told, well, donors only love funding projects, right? You needed a big reserve. You needed a long reserve that got you through the year. But again, so often in the past, we've been told, well, you won't get funding if you have more than 3 months money in the bank. We needed flexibility to spend on overhead and to spend on the things we needed without rules, right? But we're told donors don't want to fund salaries or rent or all those things that aren't sexy. We needed donors who wanted to give large gifts that we could pick up the phone and talk to and have direct access to. Hold on, don't be too pushy. Don't ask them that. It's a hard time. Be careful, be careful. And last but not least, we needed an eager to participate, roll up your sleeves board who said, tell me what to do to help, right? But oftentimes we hear, well, my board members don't want to ask, they don't want to be pushy, they don't know any major donors, and so like that's just not how my board operates. So here's the problem. Much of the advice we get in the sector actually suggests we do a lot of these very transactional, siloed fundraising activities, and that we actually have our board participate in those too. Some of them are good, right? Some are good, right? But it actually, this approach sometimes keeps us from generating more dollars, right? But these are all the ideas that fly our way. And my goodness, hasn't there been a lot of content the last year? I'm part of that, right? I put a lot of content out last year. And so oftentimes we try these ideas, we try this advice, but time is limited and we start chipping away at the problem. Now, chipping away at the problem oftentimes looks like, well, first let's get new board members. Okay, first let's do the strategic plan. First let's actually write 10 more grants, and or pre-2020, let's have another event. And sometimes we get stuck in these silver bullet strategies that actually never fix the problem. And so I think I can be honest today. None of these are really going to solve your problem long term. If you as a board and you as a leadership team are trying to grow and get on a sustainable funding trajectory, they're important. That list I said was important, but sometimes those types of things are actually prolonging the changes that need to happen. And we need to look at your overall approach to funding. Your mission every year, your work every year, to make sure you're fully funded every year. And so if the problem is actually the whole funding model and how we're approaching the planning for the year that is then dictating the fundraising activities we do, obviously if we're rearranging the individual pieces, it's never going to work. Here's what I want to say to you. If you're starting to write, grab your pen. The number one thing that keeps organizations from being fully funded is actually buying into some of these misconceptions, right? And then trying to fundraise in that framework and getting on the spin cycle, I'll say, versus creating a true financing plan that actually funds the whole mission, right? And so if you're a board member on this call today, I actually want to challenge you to kind of get outside the jar and the label that maybe you're looking through and stand outside and look at it differently, look at the funding model differently, because you can't wait anymore. 2020 has shown us that. I tell everybody, don't waste a crisis, right? Lean into that feeling that feels a little risky, that there actually is a better way, because there is a better way. And it's not risky. It's actually a really great and calculated business decision. And so I want to challenge you to think differently about that overhead that I mentioned. Now, growth has way more to do with the leadership's comfort level with the spend, if you will. So my clients start on a new funding trajectory when they make a conscious decision to invest in overhead. Well, what does that look like, Sherry? Woo, that number's scary, only 70% to program. Well, hold on. This is an intentional leveling up, investing very deeply for a certain amount of time in the organization's growth so that you can get on a different and new revenue trajectory. And so getting comfortable with the spend is a huge thing that a board member can do to actually help the organization's revenue grow, and it's not asking for money. I know y'all like to hear that today. You as leaders have to be open to investing time and spending money on all three areas of your nonprofit if you're going to grow the organization and the revenue. And so there are going to be years where your fundraising might be 20%. Oh no, what are the donors going to think? We'll sit down and have a conversation with them. Your stakeholder investment level donors will understand this. There's going to be years where your program percentage should be lower so that you can put more gasoline in the tank. Now, if you are not investing in all three areas, your funding will plateau. I see it all the time. I go straight to the numbers on the 990 and I can tell you why your funding has plateaued when I look at the percentages. It leaves you vulnerable to a funding plateau. It leaves you landlocked when opportunities come your way because you don't have You haven't put enough gasoline in the tank to then raise more unrestricted cash, and it leaves you at risk in times of crisis. And that's sadly often or commonly what we saw in 2020 in many scenarios. Investing in all three of these areas, I'm not going to say equally, but at the right percentages at the right time, helps you raise more charitable revenue. So what do I mean by that? There's this decision to invest in overhead. And if right now in the back of your mind, you're hearing like, oh, no, but we want to put as much money into program as possible. Or a lot of times I hear ED say, oh, my board wants to only put money into program. It's going to throw our percentages off. Well, which one of these scenarios, right, of the red over here when we were spending 90% on program, reducing up top to 76% program, where are we putting more money into program? Well, it's the 3.1. In this scenario that I see every day, we're putting more money into program, but you have to be comfortable with the spend. If you are letting the fear of the percentages drive your planning, drive your budgeting, drive your fundraising activities for the year, you're going to get stuck. You must, as a board member, embrace the spending money leads to money and leads to revenue growth, even when it feels risky. If you think again of sitting down with individual donors and having those strategic level conversations, those investment level conversations, stakeholder to stakeholder, they get it. These are people who have grown businesses, who have had to put money in to make money. Embrace that investment level conversation because it is a good business conversation and it helps that donor understand that their gift is a good investment in the mission. I'm going to tell you that a nonprofit's growth, I'll say growth trajectory, has way more to do with the board and leadership's approach and comfort level with that planning, that budgeting, that openness to investing, and that openness to spending, way more than any fundraising activity that the organization may undertake. So I love starting with this because we're not going to go right to, oh my goodness, we're going to make board members are sweating. We don't want to ask for money. This sets you up to grow at a greater level. But it's a mindset and shifting of the mindset and shifting of the funding model. So that's the first. So the overhead is the first reason. If we're not investing enough in overhead, your funding is going to plateau. The second concept I want to share with you is this concept of raising to the budget versus the need. What do you mean by that, Sherry? I'm glad you asked. So this sometimes can also be a really, really big mindset shift, but the board has a huge role in this, right? The board approves the budget every year. Great. Well, what does that really mean? So when we're thinking of the budget versus the need, it's okay to have the board approved budget, right? But I also want to, let me back up. I want you to think about less about like, well, if we had the money, we would, we would have this need, right? Our budget would be this, or I want you to be okay with budgeting to your true need. So often I walk in and I always look at the budget first. I start with the numbers and it's like, well, here's what we can do. Here's what we have pledged. Here's what we have committed. Here's what we have in government grants. Here's what we have this. And then I don't know if we can have our event. So I think I'm going to reduce this. And it's like, we might have a budget of $2 million. And then the income on the budget says, well, I guess we'll kind of get to 1.4. So I don't know where the rest of it's coming from, right? I want to challenge you to have your board approved budget, but also go through the exercise of what do we actually need to accomplish our mission? Per the last conversation, you need to spend money on admin. You need to spend money on fundraising. You need to grow your program beyond that contract that you have. What do we need? It's actually a really healthy exercise. And I'm going to tell you, it's a game changer when you're soliciting donors. Because if you have that donor who says, talk to me, Sherry, what do you need? And if I said, well, we're hoping to reach that $2 million mark this year. We're hoping to do this. We want to do this, and we're going to see if we can do this. Okay. Or if I said, I'm so glad you asked. We have a $2 million need this year. Now, let me walk you through what that looks like. And to actually be able to walk through a true budgeted need to show them what their gift could do is a game changer and raises the sights of donors in the lives of my students every day. So many donors will say, I didn't know you needed that. You never told me you needed that, right? So as the board and as any leader on this call, I would ask you to really check and pause on what is your financial need. You know, are you budgeting to your squeak by budget? It's always like you're always falling short. I don't know how we'll put a plan in place. Or are you being honest with yourself? And I'm not talking triple it, holiday wish list. I'm not there. But what do you need to grow and scale your organization? Why is this important? Most organizations who come to me are not fully funded, do not have enough money for overhead, have somewhat plateaued their funding, and aren't raising the majority of their cash as unrestricted because of their approach to planning and budgeting. We have to flip the order from squeak by to, we can't put it in the budget, to actually own and believe in and say that is the number that we need. Because how will you create a fundraising plan that gets you ahead and gets you on a growth trajectory if you don't know what you need? If you're always putting your number at that squeak by, barely getting by number, it works every time. If you're in scarcity, if you've got that scarcity hat on too long, you're going to get scarce results, and that is going to cause your funding to plateau. So I would ask, I have this little list here. What if maybe you not factored into your budget that's keeping you from growing? And, I'm going to say to board members, if it's kind of like, oh, the budget goes across our desk, we kind of look at it, we see the percentage, okay, great. This is where you can say, hey, what is not in this budget that would really help you? What is not in this budget that will actually help you raise more money, right? Ask those strategic questions. Those are huge contributors to your growth. And so oftentimes it's things like technology or travel or donor management software or board software, I might say. Maybe it's services beyond the contract that we have that we never can serve the amount of people that we want to serve. Maybe it's a reserve fund. Maybe it's like we are a multi-million-dollar organization, and I got to tell you, we have no reserve fund. We have cash flow issues. It needs to be in the budget. So why is this important, other than everything else I've said? If you are going to start securing more gifts from individuals, I call those investment level gifts, right? If you're going to attract stakeholder donors who can invest in greater ways in your organization, you have to be able to share your need in those investment level conversations. You have to be able to sit at the table and speak CEO to CEO with that prospective donor and share with them what their money would do. Share with them how you're funded. Walk them through your budget. You can't do that if you have not done proper planning and you don't know all the numbers behind your organization to grow. And so everybody comes to me, how do I find major donors, Sherry? It's like we're hunting and digging for them. We're looking behind buildings. I don't know. I want you to push that away here. I want you to think of, am I doing the things that are attracting larger donors to invest in our mission, right? And that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about running great businesses where we're speaking that donor's language. I'm not saying don't tell the stories in the heart and the hero. I'm not saying that. But donors are dying for this type of information, especially major level donors. Now, from a funding perspective, it is only when we've created a true needs-based budget that we can actually design a real financing plan to hit that number every time. And it's like, okay, but wait, but that's a higher number. And now you want me to You're telling me if I put a higher number, I'll be able to actually hit that? Yep, I see it every day. Because it's that true need, right? And so if I can speak specifically to any board member on this call, oftentimes I'll say, what role does your board member play in approving the budget, or maybe like the budget every year, I should say. And I usually get, well, they approve it, right? Like they kind of look at it, they approve it. That's great, and that's fine. I don't want board members, calculating how many stamps are in the budget. I don't want that at all. But what I do want you to hear on this call or on this webinar is the expenses are only 50% of the budget, right? So great, board approved budget on the expense side. Now, the other 50% is the income. How are we going to bring it in? What does that plan look like? What is our true financing plan that actually helps us hit that, in my example, $2 million need? So the board then needs to understand what that plan is from a month-to-month funding financing plan. Then you know what fundraising activities to do. Then you know how many gifts need to come from major donors, how many appeals you need to have, how many events you need to have. Only until you do that do you know the activities to do. So I always say, board approval on the budget, 50% is expense, but you sure as heck better be putting just as much time into planning how all of that money is going to come in from an income perspective. That is the only way you're going to hit a balanced budget. When you do this part right, you really can move from the, well, if we get the money conversations to, here's actually what we need to accomplish our mission. It's a game changer in attitude, shoulders back at the table when we're talking to donors, right? We move from that squeak by budget that like never gets funded and we always feel like we're behind, to fundraising and working off of a budget that truly reflects our needs. That sets your fundraisers up for success. It helps you raise money for programs and overhead and your reserve. All three of those, we need all three of those. Then from an income side, it helps you move from that, well, I don't know how we're going to raise that much, but we need it, but we'd love to, right? To that income projection that's never high enough. It's never making up what you need, to actually your whole organization, board leadership, knowing what to do because you have a true financing plan that actually is your roadmap all year long that balances your budgeted need. And so again, if I could go back a few slides, I would, and I'd say this kind of stuff like literally helps you raise so much more money, and the board has a lot of control here, and you have a lot of say in just looking at it from a different angle, maybe a different perspective than perhaps you've heard in the past. Now, third, but certainly not last, is this concept of, I see organizations oftentimes plateau when there is no plan or training, or you're not investing in moving from mainly transactional fundraising to more relationship-based fundraising, right? It's like, how do we do that, right? And so we want to make sure that we are making very intentional steps toward relationship-based fundraising, right? And this part, I want to also lay on top of this. This is all about aligning your hours with dollars. And that is important for, of course, staff, right? And that is just as important for boards when you are volunteer basis. So I would ask you to be thinking about, as we go through this next section, are there perhaps areas where your entire team could maybe stop doing some of the traditional, very transactional activities? It actually might be handcuffing your time, right? And actually keeping you from moving into the activities that would help you grow long-term, right? I call this like moving into an overall income model that is rooted in these high ROI relationships. Now, there comes a time in the growth of an organization where you've done nothing wrong to this point. You guys are working hard, you're killing it, right? But if we're going to pivot into a different patho growth. It's got to be a greater and deeper strategy from here. This is the key to hurdling up and over, if you're a small organization, that $1 million mark, or up and over that $5 million mark that I showed you initially with that pie chart. So I want you to hear me if you're an executive director, a development director, or a board member. Your time is one of the organization's most valuable assets. And so every hour you do spend fundraising, it has to yield the dollars that you need. So my entire methodology is built on this premise of, let's get a true financing plan in place, and then let's learn and do the activities that align to those dollars, right? Not the activities that get us on the spin cycle and never allow us to truly fund and fully fund our organizations. So fundraising is a bit of a math problem, right? Our time allocation is a bit of a math problem. And so you as the leaders have to align the activities, your energy, with the things that actually yield the largest relationship-based gifts. And so when we do this part right, you actually can move from mainly transactions to deeper relationships. You move from a very heavily portfolio restricted funding to more unrestricted. We kind of move from this, we're kind of everything to everyone type of approach to really knowing where we need to focus our time. I call them single source decision makers, people where we can pick up the phone, talk to Tony, right? Knowing your top 30, knowing your top 50 donors, and really focusing on those relationships that are going to get you to your need every year. And we can really move from maybe sporadic revenue or flatline revenue to truly growing revenue. Here's the model that I start from a kind of a step one with all of my students. And if you're a business person on this call, I guess you can call this the 80-20 rule, right? I want your top 10 donors yielding between 25 and 40% of your revenue. And then I want your top 30 donors yielding between 50 and 75% of your revenue. This is where our compass is pointed. Now, when you're starting or strengthening your individual giving program, you have to be careful that, okay, great, we need bigger gifts. You have to be careful not to spend the majority of your time and energy and budget raising only restricted gifts. Writing grant proposals, government contracts. Again, those are good, but that's where we've gotten landlocked, right? Having way too much dependence on those keeps our revenue from growing. On the flip side, when we're starting our individual giving programs or trying to grow them, trying to strengthen them, you have to be careful that you're not spending all your time, energy, and budget on raising those smaller transactional gifts, on the Facebook fundraisers, on the auction items or like events and those types of things. You have to be careful. If you are going to grow, the majority of these top 30 gifts, they've got to be unrestricted. I don't need to tell you that, right? Therefore, they've got to be rooted in deep relationships, right? This is that single source decision maker approach and strategy where who can we pick up the phone and have a conversation with? And it's not going through a vote of 30 people or, oh, we changed our funding strategy or nope, applications are due in October. Who do we have access to? Who are we able to have really strong relationships with and pick up the phone, right? And so this is where we have to spend most of our time because again, if this could yield 75% of our revenue, it is worth it. It is worth it. Let's look at this a little different way. Let's look at it as this highly relational, kind of medium relational, I guess I'll say still relational, and more of that transactional approach, right? And again, I'm not saying application-based funding, contracts, appeals, campaigns, social media, those are all great things, but all of your time cannot be spent on that. And anytime I take a survey, anytime I do a study, I say, what is keeping you from growing your revenue? What is keeping you from moving into strategic fundraising? It's time. I don't have enough time in the day, right? Well, you just answered our own question here, right? Every hour you do spend then has to align with the dollars that you need. So sometimes I'll say to people, what do you need to stop doing a portion of so that you can start doing different activities that are going to start yielding different results? And so the problem is, or the problem here is that most leaders of nonprofits, and I'm going to even say most people in development that I talk to, and board members, you are experts in something else, right? My guess is you don't have a degree in fundraising, right? You've never needed to know how to do this. You've never been trained to do it because you do something else, right? But this is where we have to invest in learning the activities, the energy, the things you need to be doing every year to secure those top 30 gifts in an annual way, in an annual cadence that gets your organization on a different funding trajectory. Most people think that they are stuck, that their funding has plateaued because of all these things I've said today. Donors are never going to fund overhead. I guess we just got to keep grinding and with the limited hours in the day and just succumb to this do more on less. It is completely not true. And that goes for board and executive leadership. Individual donors who will give to your overall mission, who understand that you need funds for programs, admin, and fundraising, those are the ones who are going to put you on a growth trajectory. They are in your donor pools. I see it every day. We don't have those people. I get it. Like, you might not have the six-figure donor in your donor pool, or maybe you're starting out, but you are one away from those people. You can build a pipeline. I see it every day. But I'm going to tell you, in this mindset of attracting those types of donors, those stakeholder level donors, they need information from you. They're dying for you to sit down and have that business person to business person conversation with them and tell them how the organization's growing. Tell them the impact that their gift can have. Tell them how you're funded. Because guess what? They don't always understand what you need. It's crazy. I know you're a nonprofit and you need money, but many times donors are not giving their best gift to your organization because they don't know you need the money. There's only one person or one group of people, I'll say, that can sit down with them and share with them what the need of the organization is and what can be accomplished as a result of their gift. They're dying to have this information. I want to start wrapping up today with an example of one of my clients, Simone. And the reason I love showing and kind of bragging on Simone is nobody has aligned their hours to dollars better than her, right? She's the opposite of plateau. You know, this is an example completely of how this whole thing works. And she's empowered everyone around her, right, to be doing the activities that lead to the top part of the pyramid. Now, I always say her passion is unmatched. She's an absolute expert at her mission, but she's never done major gifts fundraising before when she started her organization. That's like many board members, right? That's many executive directors, many development directors. So when she started, which has been a couple of years now, not only did she have a great annual need from day one, but she also had a significant capital campaign need. But here's what I just said. Donors didn't understand she needed the money, right? Most people thought she had her startup funding. She was breaking away from her religious institution, and people were like, oh yeah, great, they funded you to start this. Totally not the truth, right? So what has aligning her hours and dollars kind of done for her every year, right? And as a leader, she's learned how to show her board how to do this, right? She manages up and aligns any hour a board member is spending to the activities that have led her to starting to secure and then attracting and retaining larger donors. So she's been fully funded before the end of the year for the last 2 fiscal years, I'll let you know. She's exceeded her goal every single year. since she started. The majority of her donors are single source decision makers. So she has very little restricted revenue coming in. Because she's focused on those top level relationships, she also has very little dependence on events, on appeals, and foundations. And that was important in 2020. Maybe the most exciting thing on here is when she's raising, so her revenue so quickly during the year, it's allowed her leadership team, and the board to actually be in this growth mindset all year long and to sit back and reflect and say, what do we need? What do we actually need to do? They are able to step off the spin cycle. I can't tell you how valuable that is when we're trying to grow our organizations, right? And then what has investing in learning how to attract and secure major donors done for her and her board, right? Well, it allows her to have these killer holiday months, right? Year-end months, again, that are all one-on-one solicitations and very little activity coming from appeals and kind of that spin cycle. She's raised 100% at month 7 this year. It's really crazy. And no, she's not frontline. She's got an additional large gift secured for a building, for a new program that she's starting. These are investment level donors coming to her and saying, we know you're funded, but we still want to give you more because we see how you're investing in the growth of your business and organization, and we want to be a part of that. She has cash in the bank to run this new program for a full year and has a growing reserve. And so Simone is busy. You are busy as a board member. But her annual planning, her budgeting, and her time that she spends all year long is pointed on a compass that works, right? She's never gotten on that spin cycle of let's try all the things. She's never chased the one big giant deal. Let's try to get Oprah, to retweet us, whatever those things are. It's steady and it's disciplined and it works. The key to this is if you're going to think of securing a donor's best gift and to lead them to these strategic conversations to really help them say yes, you have to have this concept in your mind of leading your donors to give their best gift and to help them give that gift every year. And this is kind of the key to what we're talking about today, getting every single one of your donors understanding what you need deeply, so that they understand what it looks like to give their best gift to you, and then keeping that meaningful and deeply invested relationship and leading them to that gift every year because they understand the plans of your organization annually. So I want you to hear, as the board, as the fundraisers, as the leaders, you have way more control of that than you think, of that timing and size gift than you think. We know the best sales relationships are built because we've got great relationships with that fundraiser to donor or board member to donor. But sometimes we get in the way, right? Sometimes we get in the way and we're making decisions for our donors. I don't know anybody who could give gifts of that size. My board says they don't know anybody. Oh, my friends could never give gifts of that size, right? We kind of think we either have to be like beggars, oh, please will you give to my golf sponsorship, or we have to be those pushy used car salesmen of like, give to my group, please do it. We don't have to be either of those people. We can have great win-win relationships with our donors, but we have to approach this in more of a peer relationship, right? Where there is a win-win, and going into the meeting that your mission is worthy of being supported. You don't get to make the decision of whether or not that donor can make a gift or not. Your job is to share the need. And so board members, sometimes you aren't even the one doing the ask. Your job is to share the need of the organization. Again, you got to know the need. You got to be comfortable with investing and budgeting and doing all that correctly to sit at the table and share the need. You can do that when there is a natural comfort level because you've taken the time, sometimes years, right, to build those relationships with donors and to educate people on the mission. Sometimes I say fundraising is educating, right? It's educating on what you do, the problem you're solving, why you guys are the best people to invest in to solve that problem, right? And what the financial need is. You can only move into those investment level conversations when you've taken time to build the relationship. When you're leading donors every year through great donor experiences and soliciting them, top 30, top 50 donors are active solicitations, usually by the executive director or development team, rarely the board member, right? You play a crucial role in the path, not always the ask. I know you're feeling much better about that right now, but I want you to hear that you have more control of the pacing of that than you think. But you've got to proactively plan out what those steps are that you're leading a donor through every year. Oftentimes, board members will say to me, hi, I'm the board member of this, don't make me ask for money. I get it. I show you this slide to share with you. There are 80 other things you could do during the year that actually create great donor experiences for donors that don't involve asking for money. I've shared a lot of them about even the investing and budgeting and that kind of mindset work. It's so important for you to know the donor journey that people need to be on and that you can participate all along the way. So I'm going to make some assumptions here that as a board member, you want what's best for the organization, but have limited time. I get it, you're a volunteer, right? You also may have little understanding about that major gift process, right? Or even mid-level gift process. I get it, you're an expert at something else and it's probably not fundraising. That's totally cool. So you might need to be equipped and supported through the process. That makes sense, right? So the best investment sometimes you can make as a board member is equipping your development team, equipping your executive director to help to learn how to find, attract, secure these types of gifts so that they can support you in using your network to respond, right? They cannot support your staff leadership cannot support and steward your network if they've not been trained how to do this, right? This is a completely different skill set than grant writing or events or social media. And so I have high performing CEOs of multi-million-dollar organizations coming to me and they're killing it in so many areas, but this is the missing puzzle piece. They've never known how to actually move into relationship-based gifts. And if you're going to co-pilot this together, you have, one of the two of you has to understand this and be equipped and understand what that process is to move into investment level gifts. If they are going to have investment level conversations with your partners in your business or high net worth connectors that you may know, you have to have confidence that they can sit at the table and have that type of conversation. Here's the thing. The tricky part of shifting into these activities that actually can change the trajectory, they're obvious, I guess, but I'm going to also say I see people make this shift every day, and you can too. But your whole team needs to know what to stop doing so you can start. You need to know what you stop doing so that that might actually be keeping you from attracting large donors, right? That scarcity mindset, not budgeting to the need, a lot of the things that we talked about today. Your annual planning strategy and budget has to be set up to attract donors who would actually give to your true need, right? Then your leaders, your team has to know what to do when you do get the meeting, right? How to lead that donor to a yes every year. What are those steps that a board member can play? Yeah, it's helping with thinking. Yes, it's helping with connecting. Yes, it's helping with touch points. There are so many steps on the journey that you can participate in. And maybe most importantly, the whole team needs to know, when you get that kind of 1 through 3 in place, needs to know what to start doing and what are these new activities we need to start doing so that we can point our compass on our top 30 donors and secure really 50 to 75% of your revenue. So you can stop doing the things that are like not fully funding your organization and actually might be keeping your organization from growing. I've told people on every webinar, there has never been a time in history when nonprofits have deserved more, right? You have shown up, locally, statewide, nationwide for all of us. And for that, I'll say thank you. But if you want to level up and grow your funding and keep on this path or respond to whatever happened last year, you may need to change your model, and you may need to change your mindset to be able to help your entire team see that there is a path to growth. That door is open, walk through it. I would never encourage you, even more at a greater time in history, to walk through that risky feeling of doing things differently. So luckily, we saved a couple minutes for Q&A. I will say, just as we move into just some questions and we check the chat, we've just gotten started today. We've scratched the surface on a lot of these really big concepts, and I talked fast, so I hope you were still able to take some good notes. I'm glad it's being recorded. I'm going to tell you that when my students kind of lean into this risk, they very quickly see the money that they've been leaving on the table for years, sometimes decades. And so if you ever want to reach out, I'm here to help. You can hop on my website. You can email me directly too, and if you want to chat at any time. But I want to say a huge thank you to Boardable for having me today, and a huge thank you to you for spending a little bit of your day with me.
Oh, when I said wealth of information, wealth was the right word.
I like that. Play on words.
Fantastic. And so that everyone knows that with the recording that comes, we will be sure to include a link to your slides, because I just love how they were packed with that information. And we will also, did you have an ebook as well that talks?
Yes, a white paper.
A white paper, yes.
Yeah.
So we'll make sure that there's a link to that as well in the replay. And right. I don't see many questions coming through, which is great. That means that you were very thorough we'll give it maybe one more minute.
Sure.
So if I know I was a little confused, questions are going to not show up publicly, but Sherry and I are able to access those. So if anyone had any immediate questions that they would like for Sherry to address, please go ahead and enter those in. And then otherwise, we have your website domain right down there. Are you still offering your 90-day course as well?
I do, yeah. I always start with 3 months or 90 days where really we're doing everything that I talked through today, in getting people actively moving towards that true financing plan and helping them see the activities they need to do to fully fund their organization. So yeah, that's on my website at quamtaylor.com.
Great, and I do see two questions here. One was, what's the next step? Well, that might be a place to check out then is Sherry's website, which is down there at quamtaylor.com. And you'll be able to then review these materials from today that hopefully will allow you to start creating your own action plan. But you know what, Sherry, something that kept striking with what you were saying, with the alignment of getting everybody the information they need, getting everyone on the same page. So to me, that's sort of a teeing up to actually just speak briefly about what Boardable is and how that our tool can better help your organization align around this new planning. And Boardable is board management software, and we are used to keep the board engaged and allow everyone to share, have just a one-stop shop. All your documents are stored in one place. You don't need to use an app like Doodle to figure out when you can schedule a meeting. You don't need to use reply all on your emails, which my board before we used Boardable was known for doing, where you can't find documents, you don't know where the meeting agenda is. No one can ever get on the same page. We also were, having our discussions between meetings using reply all emails rather than in Boardable where you have discussion threads and you also can vote on things. You can use e-signatures. You have a directory of all your board members so people can connect with one another right in our portal. But something that happened with the pandemic was that we really noticed that, my gosh, so much happens during board meetings. And what did we see this last year was, my goodness, we had to do so much pivoting to virtual meetings, and that made the engagement of our board members often even more difficult. So what Boardable decided to do was to work within our meetings platform and board management tools and actually look at the meeting experience as something that, as we now know, hybrid meetings are probably here to stay. How do we get people focused in a meeting so things actually get done? Forget about the logistics of where we're meeting, when we're meeting, how we're meeting, where you have 10 screens open because documents are over here, and then you've got another screen for the video, another screen for chat. What Boardable has done is has brought all of those collaborative tools, very intuitive tools, together into a one screen experience. We do integrate with Zoom, but what we're trying to do is create a more structure around, for example, a Zoom meeting when everybody's jumping in and you've got documents being shared, so screens are opening. Yes, one screen might be shared, but it's really hard to get that focus to be efficient in your meetings and to not only create that action plan, but even assign tasks and take minutes all in one screen so you can keep everybody focused on the mission and getting things accomplished so that they can then have that action plan for what the next steps are that they can go and do in between the meetings. So Spotlight by Boardable. I just wanted to make sure everyone knew it's a new tool, but you can always start a 14-day trial of Boardable at boardable.com, and there you can test out what we've always been, our board management and engagement tools, and then give Spotlight a shot. See if you can make your meetings more productive and efficient. And like I said, we do integrate with Zoom. You can use us for 14 days for free, and no credit card required. So boardable.com. And I just now checking as well to see if any other questions have come through. I don't see that, but again, we'll be sending follow-up information by email before Friday. So Sherry, anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I think we covered it. I appreciate everybody's time today.
Fantastic. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you in email. Here.